But I have some pretty interesting friends in my life, so I wanted to bring them on and have deep conversations. Sometimes they're deep, sometimes they're stupid, but they're my friends, and we kind of go all over the place, like my brain. I have my friend Fernando Campos Jr.,
The third.
the third. Fernando Campos Jr., the third.
That's not how that works.
Oh, is that how it goes?
The junior would be the second.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So Fernando Campos the third.
The-
Is it doctor?
no,
No.
it's not. I
He's
got my master's degree.
He's a doctor to me. What I find interesting is I'm trying to finish this intro and I can't because I'm unprepared for the intro.
Yes.
But that's exactly what I want this to be. I want this to be impromptu. I want to be natural because I always find that I have these really interesting conversations with friends randomly, and I'm like, I need to record these things. So we'll dive into it. So cheers. Thank you for coming and hanging out at the HQ that my wife Borchin designed, and I take zero credit for making it look pretty.
Gotcha.
That's it. She's also in the back, so you might hear her chat and cough and talk and all these things. But she's there, and yeah. All right, so
Let me start off with, I feel like I'm ignoring them.
you are. I'm no longer gonna address this.
Okay.
It's really just
I
that
feel like
they
I'm
are-
being rude this entire time.
It only happens in this points when it's after or before. It's like, all right, thank you. All right, guys, I hope that you
Okay.
all right, and then
You know, like when you're like friends with someone, but they're like with someone that you're mad at, and you're just like, so we're gonna go to the movies, right?
Yeah.
And you're like completely just ignoring, like, and it's everyone else.
and this is kind of why I want to do this to introduce my friends to film.
Okay.
And what that experience feels like, which is, hey, there's cameras in the room, but hey, there's no cameras
There's no camera.
in the room, right?
Can I look at it once?
Yeah, absolutely, totally.
Okay. I just, so you guys know I'm not ignoring you.
It's just this is how genuine he is. He feels bad because you're here, but you're not here.
Yeah, it's weird. So I can do what I need to do, but I needed you to know that I wasn't doing that.
Okay, so the reason I brought you in for a conversation, I mean, I guess like a somewhat introduction would help, but Fernando and I, we go like way back, from dancing days to ministry days to all sorts of post this and post that, and we've always managed to stay good friends, and we've always had really intellectual conversations on various topics and various things. Fernando is a therapist, and I'll let you kind of expound a little bit more on that.
Sure.
What do you do?
So yes, I'm a licensed and marriage family therapist here in Florida. There's a couple different categories that basically all do the same. So licensed mental health counselors, licensed social work clinicians. Like basically, I'm a professional when it comes to mental health because we're all educated in slight different things. But my specialty is with marriage family. So I work with couples and I work with individuals, couples, and families on various topics psychologically to help them improve in whatever way it is. So some people are struggling with anxiety or depression. Some people fight in their relationship. Some people have a teenager and they're like, how do I get them to do the things that they need to do to grow up? And others. So, and sometimes it's the teenager, like, I have parents. How do I get them to do the things that I need them to do to grow up?
Yeah.
Right. You know, like it's just this interesting place of expertise and conversation. And I say expertise, not coming from a place of like, I know everything and you should listen to me. But I do think that I'm an expert. You know, I've said it before. There are some therapists and some people in this world that they feel like they have the map. I have the map and you need to follow my map. My map is the map, and wherever you are on your life, like look at my map and I will guide you with my map.
Yeah.
For me, I've always felt like I was an expert map maker. So what I have is a blank canvas. And as I listen to people, like really listen to what it is they tell me about their life or their situation or their stories, I can hear on the map and I can draw like the valleys, and there's a river here and there's a mountain here. And at the end of that conversation, and not only getting to know them, they will tell me, look, I'm trying to get to this lake on my map. And I have this expertise or ability to then take the map that I've drawn from them. It's not my map, it's their map. And I can say, oh, well, if you're trying to get there, you got to go around this mountain. you're not going to get there if you don't go around the mountain or over the mountain.
Have you ever considered actually painting for them?
Right? That'd be crazy.
Like
That'd be
Bob Ross.
crazy. Yeah. It'd just be like stick figures. I'm like, this one is, yeah. But so the long-winded answer is I feel like I get the opportunity to help make maps for people. And then they tell me where they want to go on that map. And then I help them get there.
And this is your practice.
This is my practice. Yes.
You do this every day.
I do this not every day, but that's my living. This is what I do. Yeah, that's what I do for life. Is
Do you want to switch jobs? Part of me feels like I would do okay there, but I would make up a completely different map. And like, that map's cool, but check this one out that I made.
Got a Ferris wheel.
Before you go there, check this out. Look what I made. It's a race car ring inside your house.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my brain.
So that's kind of like, that's what I get to do. It's really something that I don't know. I don't even know if the people in my own field understand the privilege that they have for having it.
Oh yeah,
because it is a privilege for people to allow you into their safe spaces and in the most intimate areas. And I think, life is hard sometimes. And so sometimes you just work and you're like, I just need to get paid because I got to pay rent. But I do feel like our field is this really like specific and almost sacred opportunity into people's most sacred of places and thoughts to talk about it.
Yeah.
To talk about the one room that no one gets to go into when they come over to our house. Can you go into that room and tell me what you think? Because I really think this room is the reason why we painted all of the walls blue. I really think this is the reason, so being allowed into that space and not only
it's like
observe it.
It's like Naruto and Kurama room.
Right, exactly, right? Yeah. Exactly. I get to not only observe that room, but they are vulnerable enough and trusting enough of me to ask me what my thoughts are on that room. And
what I love is like the way you talk about your profession. And I always think it's important to hear people talk about their profession in the way that you do, because a lot of times, especially mental health, it's a trend, so to speak, today, right? Mm-hmm. It's like a trend that we all need to worry about. But I don't think people are talking about mental health in a profoundness. Right? It's always like a suffering. It's always something. Man,
it's a hashtag.
It's a problem. We need to, and not to say that it is or that it isn't. Right? Yeah. I guess I want to talk a little bit about that stigmatism. Yeah. Like why people feel that way. Why do they have this pushback of therapist? I don't need a therapist, or even the concept of what therapy is without a therapist. Right? So expound a bit on that, because I know you have great context.
Yeah, I feel like in its origin, there have always been counselors, right? Even in the ages of of kings and queens, and back in the day, they would have an advisor to the king, and so the idea of seeking counsel has always been around. But when it comes to it as like a medical necessity, in the same way we look at a doctor or a dentist, I think that's the bridge that has, it's been difficult to cross for a lot of people. The irony is everyone understands that mental health is important for everyone except themselves.
Right.
Like, and the irony of that, of everyone, I ask everyone, they're like, yeah, someone should see a therapist. Absolutely. Should they see a therapist? Absolutely. If your family member, absolutely. Yeah. What about you? Nah, I'm good.
Is it more normal today for, I guess you could say, like your medical insurance to cover mental health?
Oh yeah, they cover it. The insurance,
I guess my question is, without getting too political,
sure,
is that it's normal to cover your dentist, your primary, right, all those things, and less about the insurance, but more about, do people know that that's a part of health?
Oh, right. Yeah. And I think even with that, I think they know that they can get mental health support. I think people can know that they have it. It's paid for. One easy place is college. Included in most people's college tuition is a certain amount of free sessions, but I think a very small percentage of the students ever go. not that a small percentage of the students have reasons to talk to a therapist. We know between the age of 19 to 23 what life was like. And we had questions and problems and situations with boys and girls and, you know,
Yeah.
and what better time to go see it. The most progressive people on the planet tend to be the youngest because they're just like dreamers, right?
Yeah,
Which is great. So they're young, they're, you know, forward thinking, it's already paid for, and they still don't go.
right.
So there is what I think is part of the stigma with mental health is it really challenges us to ask the question, is there something wrong with me? And just that question
Mm.
is so scary that we don't even want to ask that question.
Right.
Right? Because the real answer is that it's not no, but it's not that there is it's not that there's something wrong with you, but it's also not that there's nothing wrong with you.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so
So you can always work on
you can
yourself.
always improve. You can always, whether you're in despair or you're on top of the mountain, like there's always.
But we treat therapy as like the fire. It's a fire
Exactly.
versus a preventative care. Like if a fireman came to my house, they would give me a whole rundown on, hey, this is how you prevent fires.
Exactly.
And if a fire did happen, this is what you do, right? Like almost in that context, right?
Yeah, exactly. So most people are trying to put out a fire or the building is burning down. Let's call the fire department. And it's really a lot more like a dentist. The irony is like my dad's a dentist. And I thought of this, you know, back in the day, dentistry wasn't really as it was the stigma. What psychology and mental health is in the past was dentistry.
Right.
And there's a lot of countries where it's still that way, where it's like, yeah, we may need a doctor, but no, we don't go to the dentist. Why would we go to the dentist? I still have kind of my teeth, like so it still exists. So it's really easy to observe where you have this routine of like, we have a family dentist and you go twice a year to go checkups and, oh, great, you got no cavities. See you in 6 months. Like that is so normalized, but it wasn't always. So I think that mental health is there. It's where dentistry was.
Right.
And things change, and I know the stories because I did my research papers on them of how it shifted, and now I feel like in this generation, I would love to be a part of that shift for mental health, you know, because I know that it was the same for dentistry, and now it's more common, it's normal.
Yeah.
I would love it to be like normal for everyone to have this is our family therapist. This is our like. Yeah, this is, you know, oh, you really got to go see this guy. He's a great, you know, does good work. Like the same way we talk about doctors
Or pastors.
right?
You know what's funny?
Religion.
What? Stevie. All I can think about as you were talking about it, I was like, you know, as he's talking more and more, I'm like, I'm a part of the two things that I think make therapy evil. Like, you know, right? Like, which is spirituality.
Okay.
Right? Spiritual practices talk down on mental health all the time. And also films. Films create this, if you go to a therapist, there's something wrong with you, or the therapist is always like the worst person, or you know, I mean, or not the worst person, but that it's just so cliche. Like, so tell me about your life. Interesting. I'll see you in a week, right? And you as an audience, you create this like, well, I don't need that. Right. So you're just being fed imagery through film, but then on the spiritual practice, there's just I love, you know, we met in and through in a lot of ways through spiritual practice, and then we branched in our different directions. And in my direction in my journey, I found so many people omitting the mind as if it's not a part of spirituality. It's like there's something more you got to deal with, and maybe there is, right? But that's not the point. The point is like, okay, my hand's broken. It's not your hand. It's something beyond your hand. Something beyond. You're like, but can I just go to the doctor and get my hand, you know, checked on?
Exactly.
And they're like, no. And that's just like I always found that so funny how they omit the mind.
Yeah.
Like it's like
if it's not a thing, like I think it's funny to address something you said earlier, and then jump back to this point. You know, you mentioned like the media, right? And it's a fact that in our schooling, they show us all of the bad portrayals of therapy,
right?
And how it's the consistent portrayal, and how we can't find a real good, accurate portrayal of therapy because it's the whole point of it is confidential, right? Like we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
So the people making these shows and films, they're just coming up with their own ideas, and they show us these films in school and go like, look at what they're putting out there.
Right.
And it's very rare to ever find, in my honest opinion, like a representation in media that is like, it's actually like that, you know?
Right.
Now jumping back to the spiritual side of things, yeah, the mind to me is this sort of like, I remember when I was going through depression and I came out of it and I wanted to study medicine and what, someone asked me if I was a surgeon and I felt like I could become a surgeon. I never felt like I didn't have the aptitude for it, what I would want to operate on. And, there's the pride and the ego thing that's like, all right, like brain, heart, because that's like more noble than like butt cheek, when it shouldn't be, but then butt cheek makes good money.
Right.
And then there's like, what about like athletic injuries? Well, I might meet LeBron James because I'm helping him with his. So all of these ideas of what part of the body and why would I do that kind of came up. And I think I landed firmly on the mind because I felt like it's different than the brain. The brain is this physical thing that, obviously there are surgeons for, but I felt like if I could be the surgeon of the mind, which is this abstract concept, like almost looking at the mind as an organ, but it's an ethereal organ. There's nothing, but it's something.
Yeah.
We all get it. When I say those words, you know what I mean, that there's this organ called the mind. And the only way you can perform surgery on the mind is through ideas, through conversation. So like my tools are words, and I'm just like, and you were traumatized here, and they're like, oh my, and they see and they feel better, and they're, you know what I mean? And I'm like, awesome.
Operation.
Yeah, exactly. So it is a part of that as well. It's really, I think, the mind is the most beautiful blending of the physical and spiritual because it is physically impacted by the brain. Like the brain is where it's like held, so to speak, but then it's also spiritual and conscious and living and not just like the organ itself.
Yeah.
It's just a very interesting concept. It's hard to say what it is.
No, absolutely. I mean, I guess my response to that in like terms of spirituality is, I mean, so much of spirituality is your relationship with unknown, with beyond, something that is within you, and then also all around you, and then in the person across from you. But it's like this, like I can't touch it, but I can, and I guess you can relate to that as conceptually subconscious to some extent, right? And then even beyond that, right? And I found like through practices like meditation, you realize like, oh, there's something happening that I'm not in control of. And you could kind of sit down and you look at your thoughts, physically, metaphysically, whatever you want to say, and you're just like, wow, those are thoughts, those are ideas, they're still going. Wow, there's a lot of them. And if you don't know how to sift through them properly, maybe you should see somebody that can help you
for sure
sift through it. Right?
No, absolutely. And
I think it's interesting because when we first became friends in a interesting, our journey has been in and out. And I had a point where I seeked a therapist, but for me, it was more about handling my ADD more than anything, because I felt like that was a root to a lot of my depression, which I still think it is a huge root and cause to how I react into the world, but I don't think it's the only thing. Anyway, I say that to say because since our relationship has grown, there's a part of me, which is not true, and don't do this. I've always been like, I have Fernando. So, why do I need you know what I mean? And it will always be like, okay, figuratively speaking, I have a friend. And what if he was going through, what would you tell them? And then I'm just observing what you would say to them, but it's not about me.
Exactly.
And then I'd be like, okay, cool. That helps me with my map that you drew. And I'm just going to add some things to. That's how I feel it goes. Do you feel like that's something that happens personally? Like with your friends, with your family?
Yeah.
Because it's inevitable.
Yeah, I absolutely. People either have a person they go to or they can't go to anyone. Like there's never that option of like, isn't there this place where people go where is somebody and we're like, yes. you know, and there's somebody for her, there's somebody for him, there's somebody for everybody. But, I go to my mom or my dad or
Right.
my this or my that. And even if we have a therapeutic friend, and then I see, like whether it's through like a conversation here, you could set up cameras, we can basically have a session and still you won't go.
Right.
Do you have a Fernando?
Well, okay. This is tough. This is tough, though. This is tough because I do consider you, and this is not to totally big you up. I consider you a genius in your own right. So it's tough when it would be like, I got a car mechanic, and you're like, you could see another car mechanic that's not your friend, right? And you're like, yeah, but my friend's pretty good. So and that's not right because also too, and maybe you can explain a little about this, but why it's important to have someone out of your circle,
Yes.
right?
Not only important, but like necessary. It's not even like a possibility. So in an arrogant way, because I will identify my own arrogance, like I recognize that this is a field that I truly am passionate about. And with that passion comes the desire to improve and to be better, the same way LeBron James is passionate about basketball, but that pushes him to train. So I recognize I am good. I'm not scared to say that about maybe basketball. I wouldn't say that I'm a good basketball
Right.
player, but I know I'm a good therapist. I know I care enough to be good at what I'm doing.
Mm.
And with all of that and that arrogance that I have within myself that says, Fernando, you're really good at this, in your goodness of this, or if you want to go one step further and be more arrogant, like your greatness of this, you still can't be his therapist because it needs complete disconnect.
Right.
It needs this
Like not biased.
unbridled, unbiased, like completely detached bubble of space that just can't exist between us. No matter how good of a therapist I am, I cannot make that space because I still come over and watch dance videos. I still come over and talk to you guys and spend time with your child. And I'm in the bubble that already exists. That is your life.
Right.
And because I'm in that bubble, you can't leave the bubble to talk to me. You can only stay in the bubble and talk to me.
Right.
And that's necessary for true therapeutic relationship. There needs to be like as much of that like freedom to know that I could curse this person out. I could tell them that they're an asshole or I don't know what the rating is for this. But I
We're
could,
New Yorkers.
yeah, exactly. I can call them that, walk out and never talk to them again. And there's zero repercussion.
Right.
Like granted, they might not want to see me again. But I can be that honest. And that's the thing that will always be. Was he that honest? Was there a bias? Am I saying this because I'm his friend? Am I saying this because and I do think that I'm good enough to truly try my best to speak unbiasedly,
Mm-hmm.
and even assume that I might have, but I'm smart enough in the field to know that it's something that if I was being biased, I wouldn't be aware of it.
Right.
And that's where that
Oh, that's good. That's good.
because I'm biased, right?
True.
So that's where it's like with the me, and obviously we can always talk about anything, and I will always give you my insight and my thoughts, and I think those can be good, but I know that they're not therapy. And that's where I'm like, even if you have someone like me in your life, talk to a therapist. I talk to a therapist. It's hard to talk to therapists sometimes for a lot of different reasons, but I encourage other people so much to do it that I also do it myself.
Right.
And most therapists do it for themselves because they also realize that no matter how educated we are in this, no matter how much like we are in the bubble, we need a place to go, just like everybody else.
And it's so much of respecting your craft.
Yeah.
And if you don't have an utmost respect for your craft, I don't think you'll get the same balanced relationship on the other side.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a break.
I was gonna say that I was thinking that, but then I was like, that might not be. I didn't know the audience level, so I was like, if I curse, if I don't.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Are we starting again?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, we're not starting over. We're just gonna continue where we were.
Oh, so the break's over, is what I meant.
Yeah.
That was a fast break.
Yeah.
I was like, that's a
You don't want to break conversation.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you were. I always have been told, I guess, in my journey of ministry, although I can't really claim the title because I'm very inactive in as far as inside of the walls of a church. But I was always told that every pastor needs a pastor, right?
Mhm.
And I think it's important that any professional says that they also need professionals. Like a doctor still needs a doctor, right? A mechanic still needs a mechanic. Even if they could do it on their own, there's probably things in their life that they just don't have the tools at home to do,
Gotcha.
right?
I was like, that one I wasn't sure about. Since the
Right.
mechanics are like, but yeah, yes,
I mean,
I understood that idea.
there's like I guess you could say like there's a truth that you can manage a lot of things
Yeah,
in your life. So I don't want to take that right away from anyone.
yeah,
And I think that's a part of the human experience. But there's also this part where you can recognize that, hey, my machinery is just not up to date for the task that needs to be done. I probably should take it into a shop.
yeah.
Right? They can get it done faster, cleaner, whatever. And that's not to say that you can or that you can't do it. Maybe you could do it, but
But there's still this.
right.
Understand.
So in your profession, I guess talk a little bit about that, like you having a therapist and the importance for you to be healthy mentally for your work.
Oh yeah, I mean, the importance for me, like that's just like the standout there. I'm very careful when it comes to, let's say, places that have had children or going into hospitals, just because of people being sick. I'm not afraid of people being sick. I don't mind being sick. If I have to cough, if like that's not what I'm avoiding. It's that I can't work. I can't think if I'm sick. And if I'm sick and I can't think, that means I can't work. And that means like all of the people that I meet all week long who are coming to me to talk about some of the most sensitive of topics will have to wait a week to find out what they should do about the relationship. How do they overcome this sort of anxiety? And so like my awareness of that says, hey, be careful around areas or elementary schools, anywhere there where sicknesses are easily passed on, not because you're afraid of being sick.
Right.
I'm afraid of what being sick means to the people that I get to work with.
Right.
And that also works mentally.
Work.
That means that if
The master of metaphor.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, it just came out, you know?
And I was like, as you were saying, I was like, yeah, I should be careful where I go. My son is in school now. I'm not.
So like, yeah, mentally, if I am not where I can be my best, if I haven't resolved issues of the past, forgiven issues of the present, or, like dealt with like my own stuff, like that also spreads to my clients.
Right.
And so I have to work just as hard to make sure that I'm mentally doing very well so that I can do the best for them. I wish I could say that it was there regardless of them. And maybe that's what we're asking people to do. That's very difficult, is to have that level of responsibility that you would have for other people, for yourself as well.
Right.
They say that, if a person gets sent to the doctors to take a prescription, that they will often delay the prescription or spread it out. Like they don't follow it to the T, right? But if a parent takes their child to the doctor or their dog to the vet, and the vet says 2 times a day, like they will follow those instructions to the T because they feel responsible for that child. But they don't feel as responsible for themselves, right? I do think of my mental health, and if I'm being honest, it's probably largely because I know how many people are going to be affected, how many people I'm responsible for. But I also believe, I would like to believe, that without that factor, I would still see how important it is for myself. And that's what we're asking people to do, is not only to be responsible for, what they do in life and their kids, and that in that way, right? A mother's mental health is going to affect her children. It just is. A father's mental health is going to affect their children. So not only seek it for yourself, but also use, if it helps, the motivator of the people that you love that are also affected by your mental health, and not in just like a you're mean to them kind of way, but in like a they care about you.
Yeah.
So get it.
Man, you're opening a door into my psyche, and I'm like, oh, should I go through that door right now? Because it's true. I mean, not just in your profession, but anyone's profession, of just how well you are. I think about if you were to stand on a stage and hold a microphone, and if you're just not in a good place, what that can do
Yeah.
to people, and you don't know where they are and where they connect dots. And I think so much of entertainment, so much of teaching, so much of uh, anything that someone's on a platform, people don't consider that as much as they should. So from filmmaking to actual theater to even people that just hold a mic to give motivational speeches, like where they are mentally. So I'm like thinking, like, man, before you talk, before you put anything together, where's your mind at?
Where's your mind at?
Right?
Yeah.
Because I had these moments where creativity is an interesting thing. You go into this creative practice like, oh, I'm gonna go do this. I'm gonna create. I'm gonna wake up every day. But it's not a sport. You can't treat it like a sport. Doesn't mean you can't have repetition and structure, but you have to recognize that you're not always gonna be your best in those time slots.
Yeah.
So you need to create like a counter, like a counterpunch to that when you are not going to be in there. And sometimes it's just saying, not today.
Yeah. Yeah. If I'm being honest, there have been days where I've had emotional situations going on in life where I canceled my sessions. I knew that I wasn't going to be present.
Right.
And I knew I couldn't risk a teenager telling me something and not being present for it.
Right.
Because that took courage on their part and it requires responsibility on mine. And that's not to say that you have to be perfect to be effective or to be meaningful, right? But in all the areas where you can try to account for them, right? So the misconception that you have to be a perfect person to be a therapist or to speak positive things into someone, like, no, none of us are. We all have stuff that we can work on. It's just being aware that it's worth looking into or being aware of.
Right.
And there are times where it goes below that line where you say, actually, not today. Like, it's going to actually be potentially more harmful today.
Right.
Even from a therapist, it might be more harmful today, in the same way that if I have COVID, not today, not today. It's just not a good day. And maybe because of the way it's affecting how I'm thinking, or I'm like, more foggy minded, and I can't work my metaphors the way that I work. Like, it's not that it's going to be a bad situation, but it just might not be worth the time and slot today. And so
it's honest. And I think that's got to be a tough struggle too, because there's also this urgency that you have with your clients or with your community of people that you're working with, that you're on this, like, let's keep this moving. You're a coach in a lot of ways, a mental health coach, and then there's like, hey, today we got to take off, right? Like I work with an acting coach, and every time they're just not there because they're on set, I'm like, but what about this week? You're having progress, So I imagine what that's like for someone going through trauma. And then, like, things are getting better. You're making it worse by not being. But you have to take that, I guess, step back.
Yeah, because you have to know for yourself that might be a day that they don't understand that your presence is actually worse than your absence. Like, I know it. They might not like that I'm absent, and I also understand why they may not like it, or but I know that my presence would have been worse than my absence, and it's the lesser of two evils in some cases.
I'm going to use that to get out of like important meetings. You guys have to understand that my absence is probably more important right now than my presence.
That's a good line.
I know.
Oh,
this is why you can't give good lines to storytellers, because they're storytellers.
That's cool. That's a really creative way of using that.
I know, it's bad, but this is the problem of my profession of storytelling. Is I think we've talked about this when I first worked for news. One of the things that left me scarred was my producer telling me, never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Yeah.
And it's one of those, like, oh, that's lies, but you're like, but we watch nonfiction and fiction all the time, and it inspires us. So it's good and it's bad. It just depends on how you use it.
Yeah.
But then you just put it in the context of news, and you're like,
yeah. Gotcha. Yeah, it does have that interesting vibe. But yeah, man, I don't know. It's really cool to be able to do this with you, and even in that moment, and hearing you take that, what I like just expressed, and then finding another story to tell that same phrase to, is one of the reasons why I really want to make videos with you. Is that, like, in the same way how I'm aware of mental health things and the stigma, I'm also aware of my own limitations in that I'm not you. I
Right.
can't see through that artistic lens, or I should say, I can only see through my artistic lens.
Hmm.
I can try to imagine others,
Yeah.
uh, and you are someone whose lens I think paints beautifully. And I just think just being around you, talking about this, and then making videos with you,
Right.
whether they be things like conversations or their actual films or anything like that, like I feel like it's a destiny thing where I'm like, oh, like I can't do what he can do,
Hmm.
and he can't do what I can do, but what we can do is something
Right.
only we can do.
Right.
And so I'm like excited.
Captain Planet.
Captain Planet, right? Cheers. Yes.
I would totally be the guy that goes heart. That guy, algae.
Heart,
That's my wife. My wife is everything that just needs to be healed in the world. She's just like heart, love.
Love.
I don't care what side you're on.
Yeah.
Love. That's
Yeah.
it.
Not to make it dark, but you notice he only used that on animals. Like animals, heart, squirrels would run, heart, deer, bear,
Yeah.
human, heart. They're like, meh.
Does that mean
I think that's the spiritual journey of the human being is to be so afraid of your own heart.
Yeah. Not once on the show does he point it at a person ever. He's like, they don't have you over there. Squirrel, help me.
Oh man, right? Because animals are more in tune with their soul.
I don't know. It's an interesting concept.
Oh man. Okay. Or two more things. So one thing that I actually really appreciate about your mind, and I think this is where we connect a lot on whether we actually have ever said it or not. I'm the type of person that is what I would consider by the book, in between the lines, and what was it before the book,
Okay.
right? Like, do your due diligence studies. What does it say? But in context, what does it say? Which is in between the lines. And then also throw the book out. What was this before the book?
Yeah. What
So-
made the book, essentially.
Right. So I have that within art. I have that within dance. It's like, yeah, dance was this and hip hop was these categories, or
Mhm.
you do this foundation, but then you're like, yeah, but they just figured it out too. Like they, right?
Mhm.
So there was an essence before, but then even like learning a move out of context or something, right? You're like, now it doesn't really make sense into what you're using it for. So I just wanted to hear like your thoughts on that within your own practice, or maybe just in life in general. I look at it through the lens of art because I think art sometimes is so dogmatic, like it should be this way.
Yeah.
Because this is what the founders and the generations before, but not realizing they had a way of really letting go of what they thought to open up themselves to this concept.
Yeah. So, in regarding mental health, I think mental health or therapy is, I mean, one of the most beautiful blendings or marriages of both science and art,
Mm.
which is right in line with like the stuff that you're saying, because yes, there's the research, there's the statistics, there's the schooling, there's like these concepts, but then we also have what we call like models of therapy, right?
Right.
And to give you two examples, one is a solution focused, which is literally the way you paint that paintbrush or that painting, that style of art, is that when you work with someone, you focus on the things that work, you don't focus on the things that don't work, and you continue to push more of the things that work, meaning, they could have all these problems, but you find that the areas that are working, and
Right.
you highlight them, and you really drill those things.
Like 6 days a week, this kid didn't go to school, but the seventh day he did. What did they do different on the seventh day that made that?
Yeah, it was art class. Okay, so then like let's get this kid painting every day.
Copy.
So that's solution focus, and then you have MRI, which is kind of the opposite. It is it's the idea that the problem isn't actually the problem. It's that I can't find a solution to the problem, and so most people, they have like their option A, let's say lose weight, work out. Option B, diet. Option C, go to the gym. and they try option A and option B and option C and option A and option B. So the problem isn't that they can't lose weight, it's that they're stuck in this loop of A, B, C, A, B, C, and that A, B, C is very frustrating. So you don't necessarily have to find a way to help them lose weight. You have to find them other options other than A, B, and C, so that now they're experiencing D and E and F,
Right.
and the loop has broken, and just the breaking of that loop might change the way they feel. They might lose weight, but they also might not, but they might feel better because something else has occurred, and you're just breaking that loop. So that paintbrush is look at the bad and the loop, and I add more options. It's science in its research, it's artistic in its approach.
Right.
And that's where I fucking kill it.
Right.
Because I am an artist. I've always been a performer.
Well, we met through dance,
Yeah.
but also when you were dancing, you were also doing theater plays, stage acting, writing your own plays as well. So
Yeah. So that's where like the metaphors and the things come from is all of that time I was there. But
right.
there was something I always felt about that world that was not me. I wasn't feeling this. What I feel in therapy, I couldn't feel there.
Right.
It was beautiful and fun, but it didn't have the same kind of impact it has on, like, let's say my soul or my spirit or whatever you would like to call it. But then going to school and then seeing there are people before me who have read and studied, and let's be honest, psychology is a field that is understudied, meaning there's not enough research on enough different of peoples, because the original psychologist or the information we have is very Eurocentric, right? So yeah, so like imagine if we did a study and we called it a study of Americans, and all we did was ask people who live in South Florida. That is not what America represents.
Right.
Like, you ask a bunch of people in South Florida, that is not how America feels.
Right.
That's how South Florida feels. So to understand how America feels, you have to ask people in Iowa and Arkansas and California.
A wide variety.
You have to have it, right? And so the original therapy books and manuals were honestly more Eurocentric. They were studying not African Americans and communities, not Hispanic American communities. All that to say that when you talked about like not only knowing the book, but knowing what made the book,
right,
is important, so that you can continue to study more and continue to ask the right questions.
You guys never ending.
Yeah, and it's still growing. So that's where the science part of it is, where it's like we need to do more research. We need to ask more, and people need to be willing participants in those researches, right?
Right.
If we're not really willing to even go to therapy, how many people are willing to be asked a survey, right? You've been to Publix if you live in Florida. You've been to like and someone's like, hey, can you answer this survey? And we're like, I got things to do, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean,
yeah,
as you say it, it just reminds me of like the spiritual groups, which I could say that I'm a part of in many ways, which is this truth. This is truth.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that they're right or they're wrong, but what about the person that has the same feeling of truth? And they're complete opposite. Mm-hmm. Then you say, no, that's not truth. This is truth. And that like whole dialogue stops people from being curious about another avenue. So they're just about a book.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's another conversation when it comes to spirituality. But in the arts, in sciences, in professions, I think that that's a big thing is when people hold too tightly to what was,
mm-hmm.
And at the same time, people not honoring what was, right? There's like this fine balance, this tug of war that you need both, right? Mm-hmm. I look at it as far as artistically, I would say like the athlete and the artist.
Okay.
Coming up as breakdancers, there's this athlete. You got to move a certain way. You got to be flexible.
Yeah.
You have to be strong enough to do certain movements. And that is the life of an athlete, right? Mm-hmm. Jump higher, move faster. How do I move quicker? How do I be more limber, right? Excuse me. But then the artist is, okay, I see that, but then there's this way. And then I thought of this. And you're like, how did you know that? I don't know. I just, that's something inside of me. And it's,
I decided to do this with my hand.
Exactly. And it's just different.
Yeah.
So I always look at it, as an athlete, you do need to have this repetition of practice and getting better and being stronger and faster and sharpening your tool, and simultaneously know maybe there's another tool.
Yeah.
right? And maybe not every situation is that tool, but it's good to have that tool,
Yeah.
right? So I guess like the wide variety of study, of practice, and also the implementation of the many tools that you have, right? So I know that there's a lot to say on that one, but I would just ask you, but what do you feel in your field are the various tools that you come by personally? So I'll give you an example so that you can expound on your side. For me, when it comes to artistic direction, solitude is a big thing for me. I need to spend a lot of time by myself. And then in the complete opposite, I need to be around people.
Okay.
And then at the same time, I need to be working with people that are my peers in it.
Yeah.
And I need to be working with people that are way beyond me.
Gotcha.
And then I also need to teach people because it helps me understand. So those are like various tools that I have.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be with people, but what would you have for your artistic medium or your profession?
So just to make it clear, not the tools that I am giving the clients, but the tools that I use personally.
For you, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. That one's, there's a lot, but there's a really good answer, I think. I think psychology and therapy is really surrounding the study of life and what it is to be alive and to be a thought and a consciousness and an experience, right?
Love that.
And we are trying to get surveys and research and gatherings of people so that we can understand when we survey 100 people, we're really asking, in your life experience, what is this like, right?
Yeah.
So then it made me realize that by studying life, I was actually learning more about psychology. And while I do spend time studying psychology, I also just study life through the eyes of other people who have lived it very differently from me. So I use Masterclass. This is just like a platform that I use where they have
Not sponsored, right?
yeah. Or you got like Alicia Keys teaching, songwriting, and Nancy Cartwright teaching voice acting, Chris Hadfield teaching what it is to be an astronaut. Like, my conversations with you, the irony is that, like, while my clients come to me for information, I'm actually gathering information from my clients. Right. So every
filmmaker,
every interaction that I have is educational if I can see it that way.
Right.
And so keep my eyes open and seek it. So whether I use Masterclass to understand what the life of a gardener who grows their own plants, like what are the lessons and thoughts and what about life do they understand from their experience and that kind of thing, or just talking to some of my clients who tell me what it's like to be a single mother in the situation that they happen to be in. It doesn't mean that the next single mother has the exact same experience, but at least one does.
Yeah.
And if one does, another one might.
Right.
And it's just like keeping a collection it's like a Rolodex of all of these different conversations and being like, oh, and then seeing how many of them, this 7 out of 10 of my single mothers have said this. 4 out of 12 of my men have said this, meaning there's 8 of them that didn't say it.
Yeah,
so they're doing
their own data research,
and while also doing the work that I'm needing to do, because I'm listening, like when I really am listening to what they're saying. And that is also, so that's what I do, is whether I'm specifically doing it on YouTube or Masterclass, or it's just through like a conversation with a client or friend or family member.
Yeah.
I'm really listening to understand, like, what does it mean to be adopted? What is a thought that an adopted child has? What is the thought that an adopted adult has of their childhood?
Right.
I absorb that information and it just like gets saved.
Yeah. We should do a conversation where you just interview me about being adopted and put me through a whole Fernando Campos the third
nice sweet
therapy session on camera.
Yeah,
that would also be scary. Cool. I feel like I'd be breaking down I'd be like, is this guy on drugs? It's just subconsciously lifting to the third. I don't know what's going on.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I'd be down to do something like that. Can't call it therapy, but it would be a good conversation, a vulnerable conversation.
It would be therapeutic to anyone.
It'd be therapeutic.
Adopted.
Therapeutic is safe, right?
Therapeutic, not therapy.
Yeah,
therapeutic.
yeah, because there's also laws and rules there too. So, but yeah,
Awesome. All right, let's take another break. And I have cool. Let's get the last bit. Last bit. What was the last thing I just said?
Do you guys do?
Okay.
I mean, I don't have to.
I'll be done soon, shortly.
Okay. Oh wait.
Okay, cool. What was the last thing we just talked about?
we talked about the tools. So one of the tools of mine was
Data research
Data
and
research.
information and all that stuff. Okay. Um,
well, then you had one more thing.
yeah. The last thing that I just wanted to cover, because this is more of like a general conversation. I feel like you and I have capacity to like dive deep in and be like, "Are you okay? Let's keep going," and we just go down.
Yeah.
So this is like a general introducing my friend to an audience, and I think like what's important for me to share in relationship to you, but also to kind of what you just said is that so much of the work that I say that I am proud of and that I do is also influenced by the minds that are around me, my friends and my community. And it's taken me a while to come to this place where, you always like, man, I need to talk and interview with people that have, yada, yada and whatever and famous and this. And really what you forget and you don't realize is like there is genius within your own circles. So the way that I treat my friends and my family is heavily influenced by conversations that we've had. And even the work that I do on camera, off camera, and in general creatively, a lot of that is influenced by our friendship. So, and I think that's important for people to know from me to you, but also from me to them, but also simultaneously for people in their life is that there's just people in your life that they have a great effect on you. And if you can just kind of own that and recognize it, I think that you could do really great things in your own life without feeling like you need to go anywhere. It's like I need to go travel the world, but what about the adventure in your backyard?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
There's plenty of places to go locally. There's local markets and people to experience within your own confines. Anyway, all that long-winded thing is to say is that I was on this one of my first like shows that I did in acting, and I'm still very green, still very new in this craft. But let me tell you, acting is, for me, it's such a spiritual experience and a psychological journey. So our conversations, I'm like, oh yeah, maybe that's what the character's thinking. Yeah. So I started applying those things to my own craft. But I was on this, I was doing this show, and I just had this moment where I don't want to say hyperventilating, but I was like, oh, you're definitely in your head, So I actually took the coin that you gave me,
Oh, nice.
and I just started flipping it. And I just want to let you know that this has been such like a saving grace to me in a lot of ways. For one, what it represents, but also the meaning that you have on here, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But just the concept, there's too many things to talk about, of having a physical representation of an idea.
Yeah.
Right? And then also the idea itself.
Yeah.
Right? So just to read it, it says, on one side, it says stimulus, and on the other side, it says response. It says, in this space is my power to choose. In my response lies my growth and my freedom. I feel like I can talk so much about that, but you created the coin. So I think it's just way more important. Can you see it? Way more important for you to talk about it, why you made it, your thought process behind it, but also the physical representation of it.
For sure. Yeah, I noticed one of the most difficult things in dealing with the battlefield of the mind, right, is that the mind is also it's your friend and enemy, right? When you want to lose weight, that's your friend who's saying, hey, be healthy, lose weight, do what you have to do, right? But then when you drive past McDonald's, it's also your enemy, where it's like, you don't want to lose weight that badly, right? Because it's trying to cope with something. Maybe you had a long day, maybe you're tired. There's a lot of reasons why your own mind would be like, you wanted something earlier, you're going to want it tomorrow, but for the next 5 minutes, you don't, and I was thinking this is a very difficult spot to tell people to think the right way, like think the good thing, right? Because that's the whole point, is that in that moment they do want to be healthy, but in that moment their thoughts are shifted
Yeah.
and changing and coping. So to tell someone just think healthily, I didn't think that always worked, and we know that for ourselves it
Right.
doesn't always work. So I was like, as people forget what their actual goal is for that moment. So rather than keeping that idea in their mind, just create a physical token for them, something that they can hold and that represents that idea that gets lost when they drive past McDonald's. And I had told people to just get something for themselves, go to like Five and Below, go to CVS, so let's say you're trying to lose weight, go get a He-Man figurine or a little Power Ranger, something, anything, or go to your own home and make something, a necklace, something, a token that physically represents an idea, so that you can remember the token, you can hold it even when your mind forgets.
Right. It would be like someone having beads or a crucifixion on their neck or something of that nature.
Yeah,
right?
it's like
it's representation of an idea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can attach any idea to the token, but the more personal it is. And then the next step went, why don't I provide that token?
Right.
Like, why don't I actually give them a token, And then I thought, with my artisticness, I don't want to give them something plastic. I don't want to give them something that feels invaluable. I want them to have something in their hands that feels like, I don't want to lose this. I don't want to let it go. And if I did lose it, someone who saw it on the street would want to pick it up.
Wow.
If I did lose it, I didn't want it to be like a quarter, because people might walk past the quarter. I wanted it to be something that stood out enough that like a stranger would look at it, and if I lost it, someone else would pick it up, and maybe it would pass on to them, even if they don't ever come in the room with me. And then on the other side, it has the name of the office and the logo, the flame of inspiration.
I mean, my fascination with this is not just what it is, it's what you do with it.
Yeah.
It's like she's the in between stimulus and response, like just that moment of like, hey, there's a space in between your decision.
Yeah.
And it's not to say it's about the decision.
Yeah.
It's just to know, hey, there's a space. And sometimes that space is just breath. Sometimes it's like, hey, go see your therapist.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, just sit with yourself.
Yeah.
But there's a space before you decide. And that is key. But it's the representation of that. And when you, I think we talked about this.
Yeah.
That's the sound of a TED Talk.
Yeah.
That's the introduction of a TED Talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
The sound.
It's pretty interesting. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that is,
but it sounds
genius is genius, right?
Yeah. Interesting.
But I guess like this very thing has brought me to a rabbit hole of thought, which ironically is not necessarily about thought. It's about no thought, but that's not the conversation. But it's just this representation of a movement, but also having something and holding it. Because a lot of times people will have a token of something, but it's something to hold. But it's the movement of what this is, what it can do, that reminds you to stop for a second.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And two things, going back to, or maybe even three, going back to that McDonald's concept and the space you're talking about. Most people think that they've grown when they drive past the McDonald's, and I think they grew in the space before they drove past the McDonald's.
Right.
That's actually where they grew, where they made that, the decision comes from the growth.
Between stimuli and response.
Yeah.
Space
So that space, that noticing that I have a space right now where I can choose to drive past this.
Right.
And now I'm saying McDonald's. I have nothing against McDonald's. I like McDonald's. This is not an anti-McDonald's. But it could be whatever that represents in our life that we're trying to improve on ourselves.
Right.
And there's a space where I can decide to pull in against my own goals and values, or I can choose to continue on the journey that I've set on, and creating that space. And so that's one of the things.
I would say maturity is, sorry to cut you off, the maturity is one's relationship with the space.
With the space.
Right.
Yes. And then part two, I do want to give credit where so the concept of that quote isn't originally mine.
Copy.
I did look up, and there are some people who have used it on quote things differently.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a debated thing. I
Right.
can't remember the original or one of the people that it was accredited to, but then
That's a reformation of an idea. That's
yeah, so I did want to make sure that at least the words in some of the structure of the wording is in what is my creation is this larger concept and how I made it the way that I made it and how I chose to make it. And it's interesting. There's this there's a there's a concept of a token in Alcoholics Anonymous, like AA, these things, where they give this chip to represent their growth, a 1-month chip and a 5-month chip.
right.
There's also this concept of a gift giving in between military personnel. So if anybody who's from the military sees that, they understand that, oh, that's a solid piece of coin, because they have their own tradition that they do. It's not what I'm saying,
Right.
but they have their own thing that they do with
Right.
coins. And it's the marriage of all of these different concepts. And this is what I mean by allowing all of the information to be absorbed in every conversation that I have that can then produce this thing. And then the third bonus feature is that I made them paint the flame gold. And I know when someone is actually using their coin because the gold fades. So your coin is silver and a new coin is gold.
Hmm.
And I know that. But if I were to show you a brand new coin, you would notice that the flame is golden.
Right.
And the more someone uses it, the more that specific color wears off. And it's like a representation of like even the coin knows that you've been holding it.
Oh, so this was originally gold?
That was originally gold.
Wow.
And I can see when a client shows me their coin and I see the gold on it, I'm like, they haven't been holding it.
Wow.
But if it shows silver, then I'm like, they have been holding it.
Wow.
So the flame starts off bright gold and it fades to silver. So I'm like, clearly it's silver on yours, and so you've been holding it.
Yeah, I do. I mean, in the
This is what it's like to have our conversations sometimes,
That's it. Don't drop it. Or if you do, someone will find it. That's fine.
this is awesome, man. Thank you so much. I just wanted to, I guess, close with, I hope this is really like I mean, I've been doing like conversations on like my channel for a while. I just never actually considered, what if I just make it its own living, breathing thing? So I wanted to have it where one of the people that inspired me to have conversation about things could be my first guest,
Yeah,
so to speak. And I do truly believe with all my heart that 99% of the world problems can be alleviated. I won't say fixed. Alleviated with healthy debate and conversation,
cool.
even if you disagree. Just being able to sit down.
Especially if you disagree.
Right, yeah. Just being able to sit down and learning to listen,
Yeah.
but then also to share your point and learning how to articulate your point. Because, I can't tell you the amount of friends that I have that go, you know what I'm saying? And like, I don't know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Tell me. And this is not to say like one's smarter than the other, but it is a skill set to learn to articulate a thought, a perspective. And I think what's the genius aspect of any profession as well is loving what you do and then learning how to articulate how much you love. Right? It's like with the counterpartner or person that you have. So let this be an expression of how deeply I care about you as a person, as a profession, and just also your character. I never really have had moments where I've had to challenge your character. I'm pretty sure we've had moments where it was like, is he okay? Right? And then we just have to check up on each other and then be like, yeah, I'm just going through this. Okay, got it. That makes sense. So I appreciate you.
Awesome. Likewise, bro. Always.
Love you, dude. All right, family. This is the first of many to come. I hope that Fernando Campos III can join us more often and talk about mental health stuff. And maybe not mental health stuff, because he has way more to talk about than just that. But I'm always going to challenge him to talk more about mental health. So, love you guys. See you soon. Excellent. Very fun.